Check to make sure it's working. Cool. Hello and welcome back to the Seeker floor. This is our live edition. The pools have just been drawn. We are all ready to get ready for US Quidditch Cup 10, which is only 11 days away. I can't believe we're at that point. I'm extremely excited. This is always one of my favorite days of the year when we get to see all the pools spelled out for us, get to start discussing. As always, I'm Ethan Sturm, managing editor for the Eighth Man. And alongside me, his team managed to screw themselves out of pot one, but he got lucky anyway. It's Kyle Jeon.
I don't like that you're implying that all these teams aren't going to be hard outs, Ethan.
I never said anybody wasn't as hard out. I'm saying that the pools you could have gotten because you stupidly fell to pot two because you couldn't play official games this season, it could have been worse.
True. Although I blame other outside factors because we tried to play as many games as possible, and I think half our games this season were unofficial.
I understand. Well, I'm sure nobody wants to hear about your personal trials and tribulations. We're here to talk about the pools of US Quidditch Cup 10, just revealed by US Quidditch in a very, very rapid way. Shout out to Ryan Smythe for trying to keep up with his doc. If you guys are not viewing his doc right now, we're going to share it on our feed in a few minutes when we start going over the pools. You can also find it on IQA forums. Ryan Smythe did an awesome job. Shout out to him and FaceFeed it for those live updates. But yeah, we're going to get right into it, and we've got some guests coming up later because none of our staffers wanted to join us, and nobody wants to listen to me and Kyle for all that long. So we're going to
definitely not.
We're going to kind of switch things up. What's your first take of the pools? I feel like a lot of people felt that the pots this year were way better than they've been in past years. And
I mean, I felt that way too. There was like maybe like 2 or 3 teams where I could have pointed them out as like very obvious, not deserving to be in that pot one way or another. But they were pretty balanced. I think the most balanced that I've seen probably since like World Cup 6.
For sure. And I think like some of the things that looked like they might be issues, even going into this past weekend, got resolved. Like Texas A&M as a pot 3 team, which would have been a real problem, got resolved. They ended up as a pot 2 team.
Right.
We still ended up with a pool of death, but I think overall we have way more balanced pools than we've had in recent years.
Yeah, I mean, there's like one pool of death, but I feel like in other years there might have been like also like pools of life and other things like that. There's not really any noticeable weak pools.
UT actually has to play competitive Quidditch teams this season on day one.
That's going to be so exciting.
I know. It's crazy. But yeah, so for anybody who doesn't know the way this tournament works, and I'll bring up the pools for you right now while I'm talking. It is a 60-team tournament, and everybody plays everybody in their pool on day one. It's 12 pools of 5. And from there, we have 3 teams from each pool advance to day 2, which is a 36-team bracket. And something we talked about last year, and I think we can reiterate here for people maybe who just don't think about gameplay formats that much or weren't here with us last year. What's weird about this format is it makes getting one of the top 4 seeds super important.
Yeah.
If you get one of the top 4 seeds going into day 2, which is basically you need to be a 4-0 team in your pool with a really solid point differential. If you get one of those 4 seeds, you do not have to face another team that won its pool guaranteed until the Elite 8. If you get one of the next 8 seeds, which means you still won a pool, but you did so a little less convincingly, you have to start playing I mean, hypothetically, obviously, upsets do exist. You have to start playing potentially pot one pool winning teams as early as the Sweet 16. We saw this play out. You can say in mixed results, small sample sizes, obviously, being an issue. We saw this play out last year when we talk about teams like. The Gambits actually ended up losing to Texas A&M on day one, and they had to run into such a tough Sam Houston team early day two. They were tired out by the time they got to RU, and RU just kind of ran them off the table. On the other hand, teams like Lone Star and QCB, who grabbed one of those top 4 seeds, really were able to conserve energy. I would say, we were both on that QCB team, and we played Fighting Farmers. We got up on them really quickly. We played our deeper lines. RPI gave us a challenge, but it's also a team we'd seen before. It's not a team that plays a super high tempo. Bowling Green, same thing. We were able to get to our bench pretty early, and that kind of set us up for playing in the Final Four. Because, day 2 is quite a bit of a marathon. When we're going to Kissimmee, Florida, where it's going to be 90 degrees and the humidity is going to be 90 to 100%, it's going to be more of a marathon. For people who weren't around back at World Cup 6, the last time we were in Kissimmee, a lot of players that were still playing in the Final Four ended up on IV fluids after the tournament, most notably Dan Doherty, who led Bowling Green on that stunning run to the Final Four. So just some things to keep in mind. I'm sure Kyle, with his great endurance, is going to be in great shape for this heat.
Oh, man, I'm going all out. I'm preparing like ice boxes and wet towels and water bottles. It's going to be great. And I do remember World Cup 6 as being, I think, the most uncomfortable and the most dehydrated that I've ever been in my entire life.
Mm-hmm. Because
normally when the humidity is 100% and it's 95 degrees outside, I wouldn't be outside.
Right.
But,
reasonable.
Yeah, it's like a normal human thing to do, but you kind of have to. I do want to go off your point, though. Normally, I agree with you that not meeting one of the pool winners is going to be a huge boon. But, I think you and I kind of both agreed that this Nationals is the most open that it's been since probably World Cup 6 or ever, I would say.
Right.
And, there's a lot of the pools. I could see, some people being very obvious candidates for maxing out the point differentials. But a lot of these pools have very, very competitive 1-2 or even 2-3, and even if you don't necessarily meet a pool winner, I think it could still get pretty competitive in the round of 16. Having said that, it's going to be pretty evenly competitive for everyone. So I said this to some of my friends, but I think that this this Nationals is going to be one of those really weird ones where all these different upsets and all these different results happen, and nobody has any idea what's going on. And then at the end of the day, it's just going to be like a really, really fun and interesting Nationals to walk away from.
Yeah, that's, especially as someone who's coming in just as a ref and spectator, I'm definitely hoping for an interesting Nationals. So let's start going through the pools, and I feel like we'll pull in some of our guests as we go. So starting off in Pool 1, and right off the bat, we get UT as a pot 1 team and Ball State as a pot 2 team. Ball State last season ending UT's 3-time defending championship run in the round of 16 in, I guess, one of the most historic games in Quidditch history, just because of the way it's narrative.
Anytime you
like an even
make
more
that a legacy.
Then Australia beat USA 2 months later, and that became way more historic. But yeah, super historic game. We get a rematch of that. The rest of the pool, UCLA. So we also get a rematch of the World Cup 6 final, which was played in Kissimmee. Then UNC and RIT Dark Marks. So I think there's 3 tiers to look at in this pool for sure.
Yep.
UT and Ball State, I think, are at the top tier.
Yep.
They've both been ranked in our polls all season. I think Ball State will give them an interesting game. I think UT is more talented top to bottom. I think they have enough beating that Ball State can't just control a game that way and win. But I think it'll at least be interesting. And then I think you have UCLA and UNC dueling for that last spot. And this UNC team is getting players back from injury. Kyle Bolins is back with the team. Kyle Bolins has been one of the top 10 beaters for 3-4 years now.
I would say so, yeah.
Top 10 beaters change teams, change games. So I think you could argue that they are even favored in that pot 3, pot 4 matchup. And I think you've got RIT, who I was really impressed with at Northeast Regionals, but I do think are a step below this level in what is overall kind of a deep pool.
Right. I could see them pulling off maybe one upset against UCLA or UNC, but I just don't see them pulling off both.
Yeah,
But
no,
like you said, I mean, like you said, getting a top 10 beater back does change things. And UCLA, for whatever reason, the West hasn't necessarily been as dominant of a beater region as it was in the past. And I mean, having personally played against Kyle, I can tell you that he will definitely give your team some looks that you just aren't used to.
Right.
And like essentially, the two teams are fighting for like one spot. It's a single elimination for them in the pool play, where neither teams are probably gonna beat Ball State and Texas, so they have to go all out in that one game. And I don't know. If I had to pick, I would probably go with UNC, to be honest. Despite all my East Coast biases, but yeah, it'll be interesting nonetheless.
No, we don't have any East Coast biases here for sure. That's why we're bringing people on, because we don't want you to listen to two Northeast Quidditch people talk about how great the Northeast is for an entire podcast. That is not our goal at all. I promise.
But I mean, it's really I like seeing this, like all these pools, because normally when I look at the pools, even before the schedule is released, I just think to myself, I could pick out like maybe 3 or 4 interesting games in day one, and already in pool 1 there's going to be 2 interesting games, so It's a good start
for sure. I agree. And it's so. Do you think? So it's always nice to have the best beater in a pool, I would say.
Yeah,
I think it's not that controversial of a thing to say. So do you like? So UT obviously has Eddie Molina. Could you argue Kyle is? I mean, people in the Southwest are really hype on Eddie right now. And I really want to see how those two match up. Kind of a young blood in the upper beater echelons against someone who's been there a long time now.
Right.
So that's pool 1. So I think our take, I guess, is that we like UT and Ball State best. We think UT's probably should win the pool,
right.
but not in their typical like 480 plus point differential fashion. And then UCLA and UNC to battle for that last spot, with us, I think, both favoring UNC a little bit.
Yep.
Cool. So let's move on to pool 2, and we can bring in one of our guests here if we can grab them. Do you just want to review the pool for everybody?
Yeah, so you got Bowling Green at the top, looking really impressive all season long. I think they have, like 1 loss or something?
Yes.
But yeah, definitely deserving of that pot 1 status. And you have my team, Bosnian Bear Sharks, in pot 2, shamefully bowing down to the second pot. And then you have Cal Quidditch, who a lot of people have sort of pointed out that they have sort of insulated themselves into their own area and haven't necessarily played the most competitive, teams before regionals. UVA, who always plays really smart and always plays really tough, but seem to be in sort of a down year after losing a lot of key players to graduation. And you also have Tribe, who I believe was the last team to qualify in terms of seeding. They're a dangerous Southwest community team and not really a pot 5 team that anybody wants to see.
All right, so we welcome to the podcast Stephen Kersey, a chaser for Bowling Green State University. Stephen, thank you for joining us today.
How are you guys?
We're doing pretty good. This is kind of a holiday for me and Kyle, I feel like.
Yeah.
When you're a Quidditch nerd like us, that's kind of what happens. So let's just get right to it. Delve right in. How do you feel about Bowling Green's draw in this first round?
We're pretty excited. We're really excited to face Bosnia. It's a tough game. We wanted some tough games, especially me. I really wanted, honestly, really good teams in our pool just to see how we're going to do against other competition outside of our region. I don't think we faced many teams out of our region this year, so it's going to be interesting.
Yeah, I always like to say that I don't like the pure cupcake pool on day 1. I don't think it prepares you for day 2. You can kind of see that with UT last year. Ball State was literally the first good team they played, and then they lost to them, and that was their tournament.
That's going to be an interesting game.
Yeah, for sure. And I think you guys get a really nice balance where you're going to have that really tough Bosnia game, but I think you're going to be heavily favored in your other 3 games.
Yeah, I think so. You know, Virginia's interesting. They're a very pass-heavy team. At least they were last year
For
at
sure.
Nationals.
Really smart team.
I think who else we got? I forgot for a second.
You've
Cal
got
Quidditch.
Tribe and Cal Quidditch.
Tribe. Our team definitely knows a little bit about them. They faced our B team, I think 2 years ago. Yeah, it was 2 years ago at World Cup 8. And then Cal Quidditch. I mean, they're just a West team. They're a good team. I don't think we have any easy games, honestly. We have not played much this semester. We've had two tournaments, I think. Yeah, and we just had our first loss, so it's gonna be tough.
So you guys played last weekend, and you actually lost your first game of the season
Correct.
to Michigan. So you guys are winning all season. You sweep through Great Lakes regionals. You're sweeping through, and basically, last thing you do before coming to Cup is lose a game. How are you guys kind of using that to motivate you guys, not kind of be like a damper on what you guys have accomplished this season?
It was a wake-up call, I think. We had 14 people, but that's no excuse. We had good players. We had Zach Conkle, who is phenomenal. Max does, you know what Max does. He's great.
Right.
But you know what? Michigan played great. They subbed every 2 minutes, all their players.
Mm-hmm.
So they kept in people fresh every 2 minutes. And we left it in the hands of the refs, and that's how it goes. But it was definitely a wake-up call. We barely practiced this semester. I think 2 practices a week, maybe. Like last semester, we practiced 5 or 6 times a week. So it's a big difference with the weather, especially on the east side. Kyle and Ethan, you guys both know.
Yeah.
I mean, if it makes you feel any better, the track record for teams who have gone undefeated into nationals is not nearly as good as track records of teams who have gone in with one loss.
I mean, look at QCB. Their only loss was Lost Boys last year. So
that
was in range.
Was the best thing that happened to us that season, like the single best.
Absolutely, yeah.
I think Michigan was a good loss for us because the next practice, the day after, it was a great practice. We're actually doing things that we were doing first semester instead of actually just being complacent.
For sure.
I mean, and there's some unspoken and unconscious psychological effect of if you go into a tournament undefeated, you sort of, even if you don't mean to, you have this like unnecessary pressure on yourself, like, oh, we haven't lost all season.
Yeah.
Makes you do.
And I think a big thing too is that over half our team is new. So they only know what winning is. They don't know what a loss is yet until that Michigan game.
Right. So in that Michigan game, it felt like they were a bit more the physical team there. They were making the tackles
completely.
and they were driving through you.
Completely.
So now you're going to be playing day one, David Fox and Tyler Trudeau, 2 of the biggest people in Quidditch. So how do you kind of prep for that mindset that we need to get out there and make some hits?
Give the ball to Dan and Zach. Let them do what they do.
Yeah, for sure.
I mean, most of our players, honestly, besides Zach, Josh Scott, and Dan, we're all off-ball chasers.
Yeah.
Dan's our quarterback, and we do what we do. We just prepare for other teams. To me, I watch every single game that's available. So in my head, I try to get a mindset of, hey, this is what they're going to do. Let's prepare for this just a little bit. David Fox and Tyler Trudeau are a little interesting because David Fox was interesting in QCB's rotation last year. I mean, you guys saw Harry and Jake and who was it, Tyler, but David Fox was the most interesting person, I thought. So it's going to be hard. I'm excited to face you guys, Kyle.
I'm pretty excited as well.
Yeah, I'm excited to watch that game for sure. I hope nobody schedules me to ref or somebody schedules me to ref that game. Both of those options would be acceptable to me. So talk to us a little bit about what we might expect from some of the other top Great Lake teams. Ball State drew Texas. That's going to be a great game.
Okay.
Michigan drew the Pool of Death, and then Lake Erie Elite drew Rochester United. 3 great potential matchups there.
Do you guys realize that 2 years ago, who was it? Blue Mountain faced Rochester, who was basically Rochester United, and then last year in the pool they faced them. So it's 3 times in a row. This year it's different.
I think
Last
Eric Wasser would be
Gaff
personally insulted that you compared Blue Mountain as the same team as
No, you know what?
Really?
No.
No, I'm kidding. Continue.
Lake Erie Elite is better, I think. They actually have better pieces around John Gaffigan. That Blue Mountain team was based around John Gaffigan. And when you put in Andrew Axtell and Matt Openlander, that's a great team. They've got big guys that can hit. And Chris Barnard, sorry, I forgot about him as well. But I'm actually more excited towards that Texas Ball State, and I'll tell you why. I'm gonna get a lot of crap for this, but I think Texas is gonna go through every team in that pool. Ball State.
It's like the least regionally biased thing I've ever heard anybody say, like on Quidditch analysis ever.
It's interesting. Ball State has lost some good players. They might even lose some more. It's going to be interesting. That's all I can say. But I think Ball State will either be third or fourth in that pool.
Really?
Yeah. I think UNC is going to beat them, and I who's the other team?
UCLA.
And I think UCLA is going to beat them.
So Tyler's now on this call, but we're not giving him a rebuttal right now. We're finishing your interview.
We'll talk about that after. I'll explain on April 10th.
Steven, you have to understand, this is making me and Ethan sad because we finally thought that UT was going to have a game on day one.
No, I don't
it's
think
making us very sad to find out that somebody
I'm
who
also
knows the
so
team.
happy that someone is not showing regional bias in Quidditch.
Well, yeah, it's like a bittersweet
You gotta
moment.
realize Texas got to what, the semifinals of their regionals?
Yeah.
They lost to, who was it, Lone Star?
Lone Star.
Yeah, in range, right?
No,
Yeah, exactly.
no, it was not in range.
It wasn't
Oh,
in
no?
range?
It was range
Was it
for a
close?
while, right?
Yeah, it was close, and then Stitch on pitch, and we kind of ran
Ah,
away
I
after
see.
that.
You're putting an experienced team together with them, so.
For sure.
Bye, Dan. Dan
then-
Dockery just passed.
And then talk to us a little bit about that Michigan team you saw last weekend. They're in the pool of death. They have
You know
Warriors,
what?
Cavalry.
We faced them at an unofficial tournament, and we beat them. And, man, they did something. Fogel, I don't know if you know Fogel from Michigan. I think he's their captain. He's doing something with that team. They're great, and they've got a lot of their team players are freshmen. I'm pretty sure as well, and they're big. They can hit. They're a good team.
Yeah, Michigan always seems to have like a weird pipeline of rugby-type players just
That
going into
only
the team
show up
over
in
and over
like
again.
lunch.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure Andrew Axel was actually supposed to play rugby, and then Eric Wasser decided, you know what, let's just get him on the team.
Andrew Axtell is one beautiful human being. I'll say that. Well, I'll wish you good luck next weekend, Stephen. I would,
All right,
I
thank
would
you,
say
guys.
Kyle probably won't, but Kyle's the least competitive person I know, so he'll probably wish you
Oh,
good luck.
I just want to say
I'm
one more
wishing him
thing.
good luck.
Uh,
Yeah, go ahead.
Pot 4, that's going to be interesting. Or Pool 4,
Pool 4?
sorry. I think Pool 4 is up in the air. I think that's the most up in the air pool out of all of them.
For a pool winner, I totally agree, and we're going to get into that in a few minutes.
Yeah.
Thank you so much, Stephen, for joining
Of
us.
course.
Thanks, Steven.
All right, I'll see you guys later. Bye-bye.
See ya. Awesome. So that was kind of our Pool 2 review. Thanks, Stephen, so much for coming on. And I do think this pool comes down to that Bowling Green Bosnia game, which I think will be one of the games of day one. And I personally favor Bosnia because I like the team that's going to be able to make the hits when it comes down to stopping those clutch situations. I think Bosnia's going to do that better than Bowling Green. Tyler, do you disagree with me?
No, absolutely not. I think Bosnia is a really tough matchup for Bowling Green. I think last week kind of showed a lot of the problems that team could have that, the previously undefeated team could have. And I mean, obviously Kyle and the rest of Bosnia beaters can hang with Bowling Green's at the least. I still do think Bowling Green is favored in that matchup, but I don't think it's by enough to give them the game at all, or the pool at all.
Yeah, no, I agree. So let's keep swinging this boat forward towards Pool 3. Florida's finest, Texas A&M, Ohio State Quidditch, Appalachian, and Anteater Quidditch. It's the David Hoops pool. David Hoops spent years helping to run Ohio State Quidditch, and now is playing for Florida's finest. But really, it's a pool for the second straight pool, and I think it's kind of a theme that also shows how well the pots were made. Where I think it's going to come down to that one matchup between Florida's finest and A&M. I think there's a significant step down. Tyler's, I would say, out of the three of us, the one that can speak the most to Ohio State. But I think it's 1-2, and I think it could be kind of wide open from there.
Mm-hmm. I also think that Appalachian presents a huge problem for honestly like every team in this pool. That is a team that has a lot of size, like a lot of like length in their point chasers, and they do a great job of wrapping up and tackling. If you watch their game against Texas from last year, the only way was running all the way up the field. Finest is a team that relies on physicality. A&M relies on physicality. Ohio State is going to rely more on passing, but they don't have really the beaters, I don't think, to separate themselves from Appalachian. I don't think Appalachian makes it out of this pool, but they definitely cause a lot of headaches for the teams that could have had easier runs.
No, I definitely agree. Anteater, you could definitely say you could end up with kind of a happy to be there kind of play. No, I mean, and I honestly mean this. Like, it's awesome that they made it. I wrote a whole sub-article about it a couple weeks ago. But it's probably going to come down to Ohio State and Appalachian for that last spot. How do we think the A&M Florida's Finest game is going to play out? It's going to be a really fun game to watch. Two super athletic teams. I think it probably comes down to whether Harris has a great game or a bad game, which I feel like that's such cheap analysis because I feel like that's how so much Texas A&M Quidditch comes down to. But I mean, they are more than Harris, so I don't want to be unfair to the rest of the team. But I think if he's having a bad game, Florida's Finest can match them. But if he's having a good one, I think they'll struggle. Oh
yeah, totally agree with that. They played earlier in the season, right? And at
one of those tournaments that got knocked unofficial, right?
Yeah.
And Florida's Finest won that game, correct?
Yeah, they did. Which I was pretty surprised when that happened. Everything I'm hearing about Finest, I mean, to me makes me think that they will end up number one. But yeah, I've seen Harris Coleman and Daniel. I'm gonna say his name wrong. Sabrazo. The other male beater.
We don't get last names right on this podcast.
We don't. All right. I'm trying really hard. I met his grandma at Southwest Regionals, and she was really nice. So I'm trying to, but their male beaters, I think, are, by and away the best beaters in this pool. And so Sean is going to have his hands full, I think, with that A&M game, and it's going to really be up to him to try to match Harris and Daniel if Finest is going to have a shot.
No, I definitely agree. Do you have a different take, Kyle, or are you kind of in that same boat?
No, I'm in the same boat. I mean, like, both teams have extremely athletic chasing lines, and they both have beaters who can go off and sort of just steamroll anybody if they're having the right game. So it'll be interesting to see how that matches up. My hope is that both beating lines have an incredible game so that they kind of like neutralize each other, and then it comes down to like just a beautiful like athletic chasing game, which we don't see as often as I would like anymore in the game.
Yeah, no, I think we all agree there for sure. It should be a fun game to watch. The South has really been playing some interesting styles that we saw during the live streams, the South Regionals. But I have been hurt by Florida's Finest before, so I'm like so scared to commit to them when there's like such a talented and long-reaching program like Texas A&M also in their pool. If I had to pick right now, it would be really hard. I think I would go A&M. But just because of that history, I would say.
Yeah, I mean, I see your hesitation, but I would probably stick with Florida's Finest. It feels like a more mature and complete team than the previously hyped versions of this team. But I mean, it wouldn't surprise me at all if it's going to be a close game either way. But yeah. I think that Florida's Finest is going to probably pull it out.
No. So. By the way, because you just kind of jumped on, in case anybody knows, that is Tyler Walker. That joined us on the podcast. Current Lone Star player, past Ball State player, and also
who for some reason is not showing his face. So
I don't know why.
You don't know why your face isn't showing?
I have no idea. I've tried. It just says that my computer isn't detecting a camera right now, so is what it is. Sorry, guys.
That's all right. So we're about to get to Pools 4 and Pools 5, which are both headed by West Region teams. So given that none of us have spent any time in West Coast Quidditch, we wanted to get someone who's spent plenty. So introducing to the pod, I would assume you know him. He's kind of the father of Quidditch analysis under the nomer Golden Snitchy. He formed Northeast Fantasy after the guys in the Southwest did it first. He moved out to the West Coast. Played for the Lost Boys, started the Los Angeles Gambits, multiple-time winner of West Regionals. It's Steve Tagarlo. Steve, how you doing?
Great. Thanks for having me.
Oh, of course. We are very thankful to have your analysis because this is an overwhelmingly large amount of stuff to do by ourselves, especially to some Northeasters. So we're about to jump into Pool 4, and you have had the chance to play both of the top teams in that pool. So the pool is the Lost Boys, the Gulf Coast Gumbos, DCQC, New York Quidditch Club, which is NYU's team for anybody who's not clear about that, and then Intensity, a community team based out of Tennessee. Me and Kyle, when we started going over it in our kind of pre-show prep, felt it was a bit of a wide open pool, and I think Stephen Kersey also said that on his way out the podcast. Do you, having played these teams, do you kind of feel the same, or do you think one of them might be a little stronger than the others?
I would say, I mean, you have to give Calvary the Pool of Death logo, but
For sure.
and Gumbo are extremely similar teams this season. I mean, they played each other last year at World Cup during bracket play, and it was not a close game. This year, it's definitely going to change, in my opinion. Gumbo's beating it. I mean, Lost Boys have always had good beating, but I think Lost Boys are a little more reliant on the double male beating, and Gumbo's like split set beaters are like, they're still amazing. Like what's name? Oh, this is so embarrassing. But yeah, the female beaters on Gumbo are really good, and that allows them to like add another guy in the qualifier game, which is huge. Whereas Lost Boys always doing double male, you can always identify exactly who their biggest threats are. Sarah Kneeling is the name I wanted to say. God damn.
That's a pretty bad name to quit. Still not know what you can put in.
But yeah, Sarah kills it. All the Gumbo beaters, they have like this shorter girl who's freaking amazing too, extremely like spunky. Yep. So yeah, they're able to do a split set that like you have no idea who the threats on their team are, and that's why our game with Gumbo was so close. Whereas Lost Boys, I mean, we were up 5 against Lost Boys at one point. Lost Boys, their scoring threats super identifiable. You can just focus on them, and it's easy to take them out. I think Gumbo personally has the edge in that game. Lost Boys, I can't ever underestimate them just because of the fact that they always play us so close. But Gumbo, when playing them this season, just felt like. And Lost Boys, I don't know if I posted something in IQA forums this week talking about how they've been playing snitch range games with virtually everyone this season. They've played like snitch range games against pot 3 teams. They've lost to a pot 5 team. They've played Long Beach in range twice now. Utah State in range twice now. So Lost Boys, honestly, DCQC shouldn't feel like that's not a winnable game. That's something that DCQC could definitely pull out with. So yeah, it's an interesting pool, but I would have to give Gumbo the edge there.
Yeah, and I think because you said you have to respect the Lost Boys because they've kept you in range, and I do get that sentiment. But the issue is, as you said, everybody's keeping them in range. So being able to keep teams like the Gambits in range is great if you're the underdog. But when you need to be the pot 1 team, it's really concerning that everybody keeps you in range. Because when you talk about
sure. Lost Boys haven't done a good job as the pot 1 team, like showing that they're deserving of being a pot 1 team. They're hanging with virtually everyone. So I think that's the best draw that DCQC could have hoped for.
For sure. And Aaron Mowry also reporting that Darren Creary is going to be there for DCQC, which adds a huge factor for that team, both in identifying matchups and what he can do in the snitch game as well. A lot of snitchers literally cannot handle him as a seeker with his size. But then you even go down to like an NYU, who, and I'm not going crazy, just Northeast bias, blah, blah, blah. But I mean, this team just beat Rutgers last weekend. They've been running the same offense for years now. It's built around Kyle Carey, their keeper. They get results. Like they can score. They're smart enough in the way they play their beaters and the way he can drive that they're going to score some points in every game. And if you score a few points, that could get a little scary for the Lost Boys. Gumbo, very good team, but also aren't the huge, like biggest point scorers. So pool 11, definitely the pool of death. But I think you properly identify it that this is kind of pool of death part 2.
Yeah, I mean, this is the pool that, like, if you're a pot 4 team, this is the pool that, like, oh, you actually have a shot of, like it's going to be a hard as heck game. But, I mean, with Lost Boys playing the way they do, Gumbo being, like, so focused on their beating game that sometimes the quaffle players get a little left behind. I feel like if you're a pot 4 team, like NYU, as much as I'd want to say that it's Northeast bias that you're giving them, like, a chance at moving on in this pool, I definitely think it's a possibility. Lost Boys, if you slow play them, they get frustrated, and a lot of teams have capitalized on that so far this season.
For sure. So, Kyle, you probably get more excited over an NYU win than a Bosnia win.
Yeah, I still do.
Do you like this pool draw for NYU, or is it a little concerning just because of how talented the top 3 teams are?
I mean, I don't like it specifically because the top 3 teams are all very talented. If there were like the top 2 seeds were very, very, very good, and then the 3rd seed was sort of questionable, I think that would be a better, draw for them. But I think what Steve said is right, is that all these teams, none of them are known to blow teams out. They all have a very set game that they play. They're not very flexible in their style. I mean, the Lost Boys are, and so there's a lot of film out there for all these teams too. And so if you watch and you prepare enough, you just need that one win against one of those teams. And like Steve said, you kind of have 3 realistic shots. And so that's like better to have like 3 realistic shots against 3 better teams as opposed to like really just 1 realistic shot against like one team and then like having to play like a UT or like a Bosnia or something for like their pot 2 team. So I don't know. It's good and bad. I think it'll entirely come down to how they prepare for the pool. And so we'll see what happens with that.
Yeah. And I think it is important to note that like this, people are going to see the Lost Boys, and there's a ton of history behind the Lost Boys. They've always been a great program, but this isn't your, I guess, seniors Lost Boys. I mean, this isn't a team that just has like Tony Rodriguez and Alex Brown just alternating drives through teams. This is a team that has a lot more trouble scoring, and it's going to be interesting to see that play out in that pool. So let's scooch over to Pool 5. Obviously, the team Steve runs, the Los Angeles Gambits, are the pot 1 team there. Penn State is the pot 2. BU is the pot 3. Central Michigan is the pot 4. Sorry, BU Boston University. I know Baylor University also goes by BU. And pot 5, Sam Houston State University. Steve, you guys got a rough draw last year with Texas A&M. When Kyle and I were going over this pool, we thought it was a very friendly pool for you. How do you guys feel about the draw?
Oh, absolutely. It's I like, as much as I don't want to say it's the pool of life, it's probably one of the easier pools that we could have hoped for with SHSU being our Southwest team. There's a lot of good Southwest teams this season, like in pot 2 and 3, and we were really hoping we wouldn't get another game like another A&M game. And SHSU, obviously, we can't underestimate them. Last time we played them, they ended up putting us into overtime, but we were up. It was another one of those classic Gambit games where we were up 6 and we gooped around and let them come back in it. They're as eager for like a rematch as they are, and it's going to be a good one. The rest of the pool, honestly, though, we couldn't have hoped for too much better if we're trying to get a good spot going into day 2. It sucks because we do it's always proved beneficial to us to have like a good game, so we're not going into something like our last game against ASU. We hadn't played one close game that entire tournament. ASU, we didn't have any like preparation, and we're worried that's going to be the same thing on day 1 of nationals this year, that like if we're not given any sort of close game, we have no way to get ready for day 2. So it's going to be interesting.
Yeah. And what Kyle and I were saying, Kyle, you talk 1 second, is that not only you don't have like another top like elite team in your pool to begin with, so that, like there's no other teams from the top 20 of the 8th man in your pool or anything like that. But it's also the makeup of the lesser teams in your pool, because I mean, generally in the entire Gambit's history, you've only lost to very good teams. That one Funky Quaffles loss withstanding, but you've also only lost to really good teams that had really good beaters. Like you've lost to Michael Duquette, and you've lost to Max Havlin. And even Ryan McGonigal had a really good game in that West Finals. But this pool is a bunch of teams that are known for being pretty athletic, but there's not like a star beater in this entire pool. Like Penn State used to have Scott Axel, he's graduated. Just are a bunch of solid athletic quaffle players. BU is kind of the same way. Sam Houston, you could argue, is also kind of in that same realm. And I think that's why we felt it's such a nice draw for the Gambits. Kyle, if you wanted to add anything there.
Yeah, I mean, when I saw the pools, the first thing that I thought when I saw Pool 5 was that I think that the Gambits are going to be one of the top 4 seeds this year, because, like you said, none of the teams have the beating game to slow the Gambits down and their chasing game. So I think that you guys are probably going to be like the 1st or 2nd seed just based on the pool, just because I just can't see them slowing you guys down. And I guess that kind of does add to your worry, because like UT last year with their pool of life, you guys aren't going to play a quality team until probably the quarterfinals?
Right.
like
Yeah.
the Elite Eight. So I mean it'll
To
be
be fair,
very
at that point you're already in the Elite Eight, so you're doing pretty well for yourself.
right, exactly. But I mean the Gambits are a team whose aspirations should be championships. So I think it'll be very interesting to see how you guys handle that sort of, I guess, I don't know what you call it, like reverse pressure of like not having like a tough game, and then all of a sudden you're going up against a team that can knock anybody out in the Elite Eight.
So
It's definitely a very different situation than anything we've ever found ourselves in. That like we've never had the opportunity to like just go into a tournament knowing that like we're going to be in a comfortable spot and we can take it easy on day one. Last year we were already dead come day two. A&M gave us an extra like 30 minutes of gameplay. SHSU, Warriors. We were very exhausted come Elite Eight. This year we actually like have a chance to rest some of our depth, which is nice.
yeah.
I mean, but like you said, it was a game of life, but I think it's pool of life, but I think it's a pool of life for you guys. But then
Right.
the other
yeah,
four
that's
teams,
what I meant.
right? But then the other four teams are very interesting because I could see any combination of these four teams kind of making it out of the pool.
Right.
Especially with Sam
Absolutely.
Houston as the pot 5 team. Having watched BU all season and having watched Penn State all season, you kind of know what you're getting with these teams, and I wouldn't say like any of Penn State and BU aren't like the very best of their respective pots. So I mean, you really never know what's going to happen, but it's going to be a lot of like I think it'll be an interesting like 4 compelling games between the 4 teams. So it'll be fun to watch.
Yeah. So Tyler, I would say it's kind of a rough draw for a pot 4 team like Central Michigan, and there's like no real easy roads into actually competing for the pool. Do you see Central Michigan as a team that could stir up some things there, or do you think they might be a step below?
Yeah, I think their beaters like Jack Slater and obviously, Ashley Calhoun are going to cause trouble for some teams, but this is going to be a tough pool. I think Kyle nailed it right on the head, though, that any combination of those 4 teams can make it out.
I think so, too.
Sam Houston State, let me tell you, I got to see them in person at Southwest Regionals, and there's not a single team I've ever seen in Quidditch with as much heart as that team. So I think that, like, that's the only – honestly, somehow that is the only team I really see Gambits getting any kind of trouble from, and that is just because they are a team that will claw back into a game. But, yeah, this is – like, if Gambits don't end up capping this pool, I think that's an issue.
I really wish I had some money with all the people we've had on the pod as Tyler Walker being the first to refer to a team's heart in analysis. I would have been in good shape. So, Steve, a couple of things before you go. We were talking to Steven earlier from Bowling Green, and basically the last thing they did before going to US Quidditch Cup is lose to Michigan. One of the last things you guys are going to have done is lose to Arizona State. How have you guys kind of used that to motivate yourselves instead of kind of like getting yourselves down to that, especially because the way you lost is the way you guys have kind of struggled in the past?
Yeah, I think it was one of those losses that like it was absolutely necessary. And the second it happened, we all got on our sidelines and said like we're glad that happened, because the day before, like our only loss on the season was against Long Beach, and we beat them 140-10 in pool play. So we were feeling a little bit too high on ourselves, and the ASU game like humbled us and reminded us like, hey, we're still prone to the same screw ups that the Gambits have always been prone to. Maybe this is something we need to actually like invest some time and figure out. And we've definitely done that. Obviously, a lot of like the snitch on play sort of situations in practice. So the loss was definitely necessary. Gave us that like drive to push ourselves a little bit harder in practice. Got everyone in the right mindset. It would have been awful if we won that and like we're that high on ourselves. And that's why I'm worried for poor ASU, because they're so hyped up that like it's hard to be an undefeated team going into nationals. So I'm glad we're at like the record that we have. It sucks to have lost regionals, but we needed that loss.
Well, at least Arizona State didn't draw any particularly good teams. They were So everybody kind of talks about the Gambits as kind of the Tony Rodriguez team with good reason. And I mean, obviously the beaters are kind of strategies built around that and everything. Is there any player that maybe we should be on the lookout for to potentially make a difference for you guys as you get further down the stretch, as Tony maybe tires out a little bit as you need to go deeper into your bench?
There absolutely is. And if you watch our film, you'll be able to easily identify that person whose name I cannot say because we like him being unguarded. But yeah, there's definitely like Kelby Brooks, like last year, was the guy who was just perpetually left unguarded. And I would say he scored at least 60% of our goals. Like anything that Tony wasn't scoring, it was going right to Kelby. And this year, we now Kelby is always covered, and he's not as useful. This year, we have a new Kelby, and I won't say who it is. But if you watch our film, you can definitely see.
So you guys, in part, because, as you mentioned, played such long games on day one and early on day two, kind of ran out of gas. Kissimmee is going to be even worse conditions, heat-wise and temperature-wise, than we had in South Carolina. How do you feel like you're almost going to have to balance, especially on day one? Like, we want to get out of range and get this really nice seed, but we also want to make sure we're still fresh for day two. Or do you think you just put it out on the line every single game until you run out of gas?
Yeah, I'm not going to say that we're going to try to go balls to the walls and run out of gas each game, but we're definitely going to do whatever we can to cap. It was our same plan going into regionals, where we didn't give our bottom line players as much playing time as we could have, but capping was a priority, and the team understands that. And it's the same thing this year, where we're going to try to get everyone playing time, get everyone rested, but if we need to keep our top line players in to cap, that's got to be the priority.
So we've talked about Arizona State, Lost Boys, and Gambits. They're kind of the big three from the West. Every other West team is either a pot 3 team or a pot 4 team, and the Anteaters are a pot 5 team. Beyond those three, given the pools, how the pools broke down, and also the talents of the team, which team would you have people not from the West keep an eye on day one of this tournament?
That's a great question. It sucks because I think UCLA got UCLA stood a chance against certain teams, but Texas and Ball State are not those teams. So it's as much as I am not actually allowed to say Utah State because they're not part of our region anymore. I think Utah State. Okay, Utah State is gonna Texas State is obviously not the best game for them. But Rutgers and beyond, I think Utah State could do well in that pool and finally advance to bracket play. So yeah, I have to go with Utah State for that one.
I think so. And then the Northwest is going to be able to brag that they had another team make a good bracket run. That's going to be fun for everybody. All right. Well, thank you so much for your time, Steve. Thanks for joining us, and good luck next weekend.
Thank you very much. Talk to you later. Bye.
All righty. So we'll move on ahead to Pool 6. And I think we're actually running on pretty good time to get done by 11, which was our original posted time. And also, thank you, everybody, for listening. I couldn't figure out how to get the question and answer thing that we've used in the past going. But so if you want to put in if you have any questions, you want to put in an IQA forums thread or anything like that. I like answering questions, but maybe if you put it in the thread that I posted to say about this podcast, that might work well. Awesome. So moving on to Pool 6. Rochester United and Lake Erie Elite are at the top of it, along with Oklahoma State University, the Long Beach Funky Quaffles, who beat Steve's Gambits earlier in the season, and Marquette University. RU and Lake Erie Effect played very recently, played in range, and Lake Erie had Rick Wasser beating, which shows how lacking their depth was. We love you, Rick. I'm sorry. Tyler, were you at that game, or did you just watch the film of that game? Or
I just watched film of it.
Okay.
Yeah, but I've gotten to see both of these teams a lot, and I mean, this is I think going to be a great game. Maybe not so much for watching elite beating. Both teams do have really good beaters, but this is going to be just a hit match between. I mean, obviously the headline is former Team USA players Shane Hurlburt and Andrew Axtell.
Yeah, but so I mean, do you think that this game? It's hard to say because RU I feel like plays everybody in range the way they play. But do you see this being a stitch range game, or do you think RU kind of turns on another gear with it being US Quidditch Cup?
I definitely see this being an stitch range game. Lake Erie has shown that they are hanging right around the top level all season, and I mean this is a pretty solid pool for them to kind of break out in. I think Oklahoma State provides a tough matchup for both those two teams. I think honestly the top 3 teams are built very similar. They all have pretty solid drivers, 1 or 2 really good point defenders, and then solid beaters, good fundamental beaters. And so I see all 3 of those games being really good, but I don't see any of those teams really separating themselves in my mind. But also I said that last year about Rochester United, then they dominated their pool. So
yeah. I mean, I'm so scared to say anything about RU because this time last year on this podcast, I just was shitting on them for not having the seeking and not being able to win close games. And then we played them in the finals and almost lost them with them catching the secret regulation. So I'm going to be really careful right now. But I do think it's a 3-team pool. I think it's going to be 3 teams fighting for seeds as opposed to 4 or 5 teams fighting for advancing.
Mm-hmm.
I think Long Beach, obviously, they had their big win, but I think that was more a result of knowing the Gambits really well. The classic, you see a team a ton. They had a ton of players overlapping last year on the Guardians. And I think that more played into it. I don't know that. I mean, I know Marquette is a solid team, but again, these are three really, really solid teams at the top of that pool. Anybody else have any takes on that pool?
I'm no, yeah.
No, that's fair.
No, I mean, I think the top three teams are going to just make it through. I think they'll sort of keep each other from getting a better seed. So
Right.
that might be a little bit problematic for them, but I just don't think there's too much drama as far as like who advances.
Right. So now that we're halfway through, we talked a lot about who could get top 4 seeds. And then we've talked about a lot of pools that are kind of up in the air. I think we all think Gambits can grab one of those top 4 seeds.
Yep.
Yeah.
After what Steven said, he thinks UT is going to grab one of them. Tyler, you want to make your defense now about Ball State?
Yeah. So I mean, okay. First of all, this Texas team is very good. And honestly, this is a very different Ball State team than I think people saw last year at Nationals. But this is still an incredibly good Ball State team. They did not look very good last weekend, I believe, at Ohio. But they were also missing their primary ball carrier and arguably their best defensive qualifier player as well, Nick Kaufman. I think this is a team that beating-wise can hang with UT. UT's depth in the chaser game looks a little bit better than last year, so that might be tough for Ball State. But I still think this is at least close to instant range game. And I mean, I have to favor Jason in that match. I mean, like I feel like that may be a little biased, but I don't know. I really think that can't be too biased.
No, that's fair. I mean,
And then what is your statement about Steven saying that he thinks that Ball State might get 4th in this pool?
I mean, so I would say that could happen if Kyle Bullens maybe had been playing all year, but from everything I've heard is he's coming back pretty rusty. I think he knows what he's going to be doing, but so does Matt Brown, Aaron Moreno, Becca Sampson, and a lot of the rest of the Ball State beating line. I need to watch a little bit more on UCLA to kind of make a definitive say about them, but I'm not super hyped on them. I don't see Ball State not advancing. Yeah.
I mean, Kyle Bones versus the Kissimmee Humidity might be like the marquee matchup of pool.
Oh my god. Oh my gosh.
But yeah, I
so
mean,
much shade.
No. I love Kyle Bones. I think he's a wonderful beater. I think he's so smart about it because he's one of those beaters who knows he doesn't have a back. Like some people can play out of their minds. They know they can just like flip it to the next guy, or they can just be Max Havlin and have a magical endurance. But like Kyle knows his endurance and knows he doesn't have anything behind him and plays to exactly that.
And still manages to be supremely effective.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. And so I think Ball State, it's just like, it's the same thing as Ball State last year, which I mean, I think it's hard to say Ball State is better this year than they were last year. And last year they basically had to get by on a ton of snitch grabs, which is a totally legitimate thing to do, but it always makes things a bit more coin flippy. I mean, if they let's say it's the result of the UT Ball State game where UT does get a little out of range. So now they're playing 3 other teams. If UCLA and UNC both keep them in range, the coin flips are definitely tilted towards Ball State, but like still a million things can happen in an in-range game. So they lose those 2 coin flips and they're out.
Last year, I mean, we only played 1 game in pool play out of range, and that was against Emerson, and none of these teams are as bad as Emerson was last year.
The team even was like super athletic. I was very impressed with them.
Ball State played RIT at the first term of the season, again without Nick Kaufman, but that was an instant range game. So I mean, I am not confident that this Ball State team can put any team out of range, but I also have 100% confidence in Jason Bowling to catch every single snitch.
And also my biggest screw up, as pointed out in the forums so far in this pod, was saying that there was no particularly good beater in Pool 5 when two-time Team USA Ashley Calhoun is in Pool 5. So not my best moment, but yeah.
It's a yeek moment.
Yeah, we have our fair share of yeeks when we try to do teams in an hour and a half. Pool 7. So Steve DiCarlo, or maybe somebody mentioned Pool 5 was kind of a pool of life. Pool 7 is the true pool of life. So let's talk about what Mizzou Quidditch pulled off in this thing. So Mizzou is from the Midwest. All that does is rule out other Midwest teams. They have to draw a Southwest team. They drew a Pot 5 B team. Then they didn't draw a Northeast team. They didn't draw a Great Lakes team. They drew a South team and a Northwest team, and then a Pot 3 West team. So the full pool being Mizzou Quidditch, Boise State of Braxton, Crimson Elite, Southern Storm, and Silver Phoenix. Good for Mizzou. And also, but also, I mean, kind of, it's become a great rivalry, the Crimson Elite Boise State rivalry. And so it should be really interesting to see that game pull out, though I'm sure at the same time they're kind of sad that they're traveling all the way to Kissimmee to play each other again. But yeah, so this pool, I think it kind of plays right down the seed lines. The pot lines. I'd be surprised if it did something else.
Yeah, I mean, Mizzou, I cannot argue that this is not the pool of life. Mizzou has no reason to not win this pool. Yeah, I mean, that's pretty much it for me, honestly.
Yeah. No. Yeah, I mean, Crimson Elite Boise State will probably come down to like a snitch grab just because they know each other so well. I think they've like split like their last 15 games against each other. There's some ridiculous stat like that. But do we think Mizzou has a high enough ceiling that they can grab a top 4 seed from this pool? Can they score enough? It's kind of you, Tyler. You're the most local.
It's honestly, like, looking across the pools, I don't know that you need to cap this year to get a top 4 seed.
I think that's very valid.
I think that they can get a top 4 seed. It's really to me, it comes down to that Crimson Elite game. Because Crimson Elite is going to play really smart, and they have enough talent to hang with Mizzou enough. And I honestly think that unless Mizzou comes into that game with the intention of capping, like that, they're not going to end up like really that far out of range against a Crimson Elite, a smart Crimson Elite team.
Right. No, I think that's very fair that the Crimson Elite could definitely do a number on them. Boise State, I feel like we don't really know, like just like we didn't really know last year when they went all the way to the Elite 8. But I mean, Southern Storm and Silver Phoenix, I think they're definitely kind of the odd men out here from this pool. So I think that's all we have to say from that. Move on to a much more interesting pool in Pool 8. Finally, the Pot 2 Lone Star team lands, and Tyler Walker's team. Arizona State is Pot 1, Lone Star is Pot 2, University of Miami Pot 3, Macaulay Pot 4, Richmond Pot 5. I'm really happy that Lone Star drew Arizona State over some other teams they could have drawn, which isn't to say that Arizona State isn't a solid team, but like it's at least reasonable to kind of think them as like a Lone Star Pot 1, Arizona State Pot 2, instead of just like two of the best teams in the country playing in a pool together. Beyond that, I think things remain interesting. Macaulay, who is a team I've never been that high on, just had an incredible weekend, made a tournament run at Knights Cup, knocked off Rutgers, even played RPI tough. Their offense is really, really suspect, but they play good defense. And if you can keep a game low in Quidditch, and they also are happy to slow ball, they will walk it down the field. And that's not a recipe you want to see out of your Pot 4 team. I want a Pot 4 team that wants to run and gun all day. That's exactly what I want out of my Pot 4 teams. Yep. But beyond that, I think Arizona State is kind of a Pot 1 team that Lone Star would have wanted to see. Not because they're not good, but just the way they match up. Arizona State's a physical team with some solid beating, but that's kind of what Lone Star is too. It's not a team that's going to play them on a different axis. And I think that's what Lone Star is going to want to see here. We got a question on what should Lone Star do to max out ASU. First, you need to neutralize their beating game. I think all their beaters are really solid. But from there, what QCB did last year and what I've seen teams have success with against Arizona State before is really a drive and dish. I don't think they cover the areas outside the hoops that well. I think you can draw their defense in with drives. And when you literally tell Lone Star that all you have to do is go neutral in the beater game and then run drive and dishes, like Lone Star is going to be in good shape there.
Yeah. Have you met Stevie Bell and Becca DuPont? They're kind of big.
I've been like salivating over Stevie Bell's passes for like 5 years now. So Yes, I have met. Yes, I have met them. University of Miami, Arizona State. I think Arizona State's heavily favored, but like that's a really cool classic college Quidditch matchup. I just love college Quidditch. I'm sorry. Being at Knights Cup last weekend with all college teams was pretty awesome. But I don't think anything is too clear cut in this pool. Besides, I think Lone Star will win it pretty handily.
Do you think that Lone Star could max out / get one of the top 4 seeds?
Yes.
Yeah, I tend to agree with you as well. I mean, I guess it depends on how the teams play them because Lone Star has such a reputation, and I'm sure that some of these teams they don't want to go into bracket play broken and falling apart from having to play Lone Star physically. So I could see all 4 teams sort of just slowballing to the best of their abilities and trying to, just not play physical, pass around, hide behind their beaters, reset as much as they can. In which case, I'm kind of curious to see what Lone Star will do as far as holding off the snitch and trying to max out. I mean, you don't have to say anything, Tyler, but I guess so. This is more geared towards Ethan. What do you think is gonna?
So I don't think Arizona State's going to suddenly bring that out of their arsenal. Like they played the gambits already. They didn't play like that.
Right, but I mean,
they
also
us last year. They didn't play like that. I don't think it's something that they're going to suddenly do.
That's true.
Macaulay's definitely going to do it. I just don't know if they have enough talent for it to matter.
Mm-hmm.
It's going to be enough to be a headache for Arizona State and Miami. Not that they'll win, but it'll be a headache. I don't think it'll be enough for Lone Star. Because the way they bring it down, if Lone Star just wins a couple bludger battles, it's going to become a problem really quickly.
Right.
I think the thing that separates this Lone Star team from previous teams is I think we have an amazing quaffle game, but I think our beater game is phenomenal this year. I mean, obviously you have Michael Duquette, but along with him, people should know who Sam Regan, Josh Carroll, obviously Hope Machala, Molly Linsing are, and all of those people are going to be able to press any of these beaters. I've seen a lot of Arizona State, and honestly, not a knock on them, but that was the team that we wanted to draw because I think we do match up really well with them, and they're going to be a team that's going to play us. I kind of how a lot I think a Southwest team is going to play us, and so I think that's going to be a really good game. But I mean, I definitely see us being able to get a top 4 seed, but I mean, at least in my mind, we're really going for a lot of chemistry, so we don't need a top 4 seed. So if teams are gonna, let us win and catch the snitch, I think we're okay with that.
Yeah, and I mean, just going back to your point, Kyle, looking at Miami's results this season, they've played Finest 3 times. They only played them in range once. They played the Heat. They couldn't keep them in range. So their resume doesn't show a team that's trying to slow it down and keep all these teams just from playing Quidditch.
Okay.
So I think Lone Star could definitely be in contention for one of those top spots.
Right.
Moving on to Pool 9, I think another team that's going to be in contention for one of those top spots is going to be Texas State.
Yeah.
They draw a Rutgers team who really struggled last weekend and kind of was lucky to stay where they were pots-wise because of that. Utah State Quidditch, University of Rochester, Miami University of Ohio, not University of Miami that we saw a pool ago. Texas State should have no problems in this pool. I'd be really surprised if they did. But I think the rest of the pool is super interesting. Utah State coming off whatever happened at Northwest Regionals. And we just had Steve DeCarlo on, and he was talking very highly of them. But then you get some really interesting looks. I mean, Rutgers brings out Phil Kane and Devin Lee in their beater set. University of Rochester loves playing the 2-male beater set. I've seen them in it more than out of it this season. I think they only carry 1 or 2 female chasers or something ridiculous. 1 or 2 female beaters or something weird like that. So I like team when you're looking for pot 4 and pot 5 teams that could spring upsets. You want teams that can give you different looks. So that's something Rochester can do. Tyra, you can probably talk to Miami better than I can, whether they could hang in this pool. But it does seem a little bit wide open.
Yeah, I think Miami is always a team that kind of frustrates me, not because they're not good, but because they're kind of right on that cusp. They have honestly all the athleticism you'd ever want in the chaser position. They play relatively smart, but they're like one step away. So I see this being a pool that they could kind of nudge themselves into. But I think that also Utah State, Rutgers are two very experienced teams who I think will be able to close the door on Miami.
Yeah, I mean, the concern that Rutgers showed last weekend is they weren't that good at putting up points on offense, or as well as they should have. They weren't getting, like, Devin Lee, I feel like he doesn't have that big of a name nationally, but is like a super talented beater. And I feel like when you watch like how a lot of the top beaters just can like take over a game, like I don't know if he can't or they don't let him, but it's one of those two things. And then like you've got like this passing option in Lindsay Morella, and I feel like she gets nowhere near the touches you'd expect from a female chaser. I think, Kyle, you said to me last weekend that the female chaser is the key step for a team to become elite, but Rutgers isn't close enough to that for it to matter.
Yeah, I mean, it's because like just the way that the game is played, the female chaser is always going to be the one typically left open. And if you have an elite team that draws the appropriate amount of attention, a player like Lindsay can score at will. And we saw that with MLQ. I don't know if you remember the first season, but she and Jules were the two leaders for scoring throughout the entire championship tournament. And there's a reason for that. Is because
I mean, was there like a decent person to get Lindsay the ball for that Titans team?
I don't know. That's a good question. Yeah, I mean, like, I feel like a female chaser is a luxury that an elite team that is contending for a championship has. I also think that Rutgers could use her better.
Yeah.
And I've always been high on Rutgers as a very, very talented team as far as the actual skill level of the players go, but I've never been high on Rutgers as a team in terms of their strategy and how they use their players on the field cohesively as a team.
Right.
And I hope that they look at some things and realize what they have in Lindsay and try to use her better, because like as a coach personally, like the way that they use her, it upsets me a lot whenever I watch that team.
Right. And like for like an example of the opposite, last year when you think about the Fighting Farmers, so they have Vanessa Go, who I think is unquestionably the best female chaser that's ever played this game. I don't think it's particularly close. I know people have other arguments. I completely disagree with
No, she's a beast.
I mean, I think you're about to get into the point, but the reason why she separates herself from the pack is because she could effectively run an offense as a point chaser.
Right. So, and I'm not saying Lindsay can do that, but the fact that they like what Fighting Farmers did is because obviously they weren't like a nationals contending team, so they weren't a team that could just have the luxury of female chaser. So they put the quaffle in her hands and they said, "Hey, everybody, look at this look we're giving you." Like figuring out how to guard Vanessa was actually one of the toughest matchups QCB dealt with, like for up until Lone Star, basically.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Like it created all kinds of issues, and I feel like Rutgers doesn't create as many of those issues as they could. But we're getting a little off topic. Real
quick. I do think that Lindsay can do to an extent what Vanessa Go can do. I think she's not given the opportunities that honestly Vanessa Go was given so early in like the UCLA Quidditch. And yeah, I really do think that Rutgers is really underutilizing like an incredible matchup in one of the best female chasers in the game right now. And I mean, yeah, that's all I got. Also, hi Phil Kane.
But yeah, so I can see like. So Miami might be a step down, but I think at least what Tyler said, I don't want to shut out a team I don't know that much about. But I think Rochester, Utah State, Rutgers could all kind of be in the running for that second spot. But I do see Texas State potentially being one of those top four teams from this pool. I think it's a pretty friendly draw for them, which they earned after a really unfriendly draw last year. So yeah, moving on to Pool 10, we get a matchup I'm really excited about, again, because I'm kind of a nerd about college Quidditch. And I think Maryland Quidditch, the Pot 1 team, and RPI Quidditch, the Pot 2 team, are two of the strongest college programs in the sport right now, especially if you take away like the Southwest top teams. And from there, Minnesota Quidditch, Silicon Valley Scroots, and Baylor University. I'm so excited the two Hoops Zone teams are in the same pool. Right. Not that Baylor plays the Hoop Zone anymore, but the two teams that used to play it, I guess, which sounds less exciting now that I say it. it's a lot of really interesting styles in this pool. Like, I think Maryland is in good shape, but I don't think they kind of like get the breeze of where it's like the Gambits just have a bunch of matchups where all of the matchups play into exactly what they want to do. I think Maryland gets a bunch of matchups where they should be favored, but have a bunch of teams who are going to do their own things that are going to make Maryland's life more difficult.
I mean, I'm sure the Maryland leadership saw their pool and thought, God damn it, we're going to have to do so much like watching tape and studying because all 4 of these teams play very oddly. And it's Maryland easily has the talent to deal with all 4 teams, but they have to approach it the right way. Otherwise, they're going to get burned.
Right. So in the meantime, we're coming to a run of kind of relevant Northeast teams. So we're welcoming on to the podcast Jake Archibald. Jake, thanks for coming on.
No problem. How's it going?
I'm just mad at you that you ruined our planned gag. But
no, I got it right here. I got it.
Okay. Really proud of you, Jake. Came through in the clutch.
Absolutely.
So at the top of Pool 10, we've got RPI, Quidditch, and Maryland Quidditch. I think 2 teams you're pretty familiar with. Somehow these 2 teams haven't played each other this season. I had to look it up because it sounded right, but it seemed wrong considering how close they are and how many of the tournaments in Northeast and Mid-Atlantic overlap. RPI has a really specific style of play, and I think I could potentially see that frustrating Maryland. How do you potentially see that matchup playing out?
I think RPI is going to frustrate anyone they play against. I mean, they actually run a set offense, which is a lot different than 99.9% of the teams who have a ball carrier and they try to score without a beater.
Yeah.
Their offense is fluid. Their offense is built on passes. It's predicated on smart, quick cuts, and like it's actually useful and works well as opposed to just on the fly like most teams.
Right. So, I mean, I think if I had to call that, I would very confidently say, if I was a betting man, that's going to be a snitch range game at the top of the pot.
Absolutely. I mean, it's going to be similar to, I think, the RPI Tufts games at Northeast Regionals.
Right. Are you kind of on that same page, Kyle?
Sorry, what?
Are you kind of on that same page?
Yeah, I think RPI is going to keep it in a snitch range game. I think Maryland will still be up, though, but I think it's anybody's game.
Which gets interesting because if Maryland's up, like Teddy likes to come off and seek in those situations. And then it's like, can Maryland potentially run out of range at that point? But at the same time, RPI is a smart team. They're probably not going to – they're going to try not to let that happen. Though I would say that in their game at Cat City against QCB, they kind of let you guys run out of range by not taking any risks in the seeker game. So that could be kind of an interesting dynamic to see play out. At pot 3, we have Minnesota, who I think historically has always like done a solid job, like always either met or exceeded expectations, and nobody ever gives them much credit. I feel like, Tyler, you could probably speak to them best, but I mean, feels like a pretty good pool draw for them, and it feels like a situation where, once again, they're going to kind of be that team that just kind of goes out, takes care of business, makes day 2.
Yeah, this is Minnesota's a more athletic team than a lot of people kind of realize before they play them. I think they got a good matchup in the Scroots, but one like kind of like what Kyle alluded to, like that you have to really study film for to get a feel for how they're going to play. Baylor's really the only team that I see not really being in contention. I think they're going to be a good team and are going to like learn a lot from this pool, but I don't really see them being able to hang.
Right. But at the same time, you've just got like so many different things that want to slow the game down. Correct me if I'm wrong. Minnesota's still playing the hoop zone?
No, they're not playing that anymore.
All right. But even so, I mean, RPI's offense kind of likes to control the tempo of the game. Silicon Valley Scroots offense loves to control the tempo of the game. So when we kind of see these dynamics playing out through the pool, it's going to be kind of interesting to see how different teams handle this. I don't think it's as clear cut as it could be. I don't think Maryland's going to be one of those top 4 ranked teams. I do think they win the pool though RPI, of course. So I could see even RPI like beating Maryland and then like losing to somebody else because RPI. Well, no, RPI has like struggled against lesser teams than them. I mean, like
no, I agree with you. Yeah.
Like we were talking about, like that Tufts RPI game. Like Tufts should have been a lot better than RPI should have been a lot better than the Tufts team. It should have been range. If RPI is like the top 20 team that we've been kind of claiming them as, and then of course like the Scroots, like it's years since like prime Scroots. Like it feels weird, but like World Cup 7, like the Scroots went to the Sweet 16 and lost to BU on a snitch grab. And then like World Cup 8, they almost made bracket play in the crazy Swiss system. And World Cup 9, they made bracket play on day 2, which I think a lot of people don't even know. So like this pool feels, I agree Baylor might be a step down, but I could see either Silicon Valley or Minnesota moving on. I could see RPI being on top of the pool. I could see Maryland being on top of the pool. I could see 3 teams tied 3-1. It seems like a very open pool.
Yeah, I'm really excited for the beater matchup at the top of that pool. I honestly, I was looking through, like trying to look through. I think that might be like the best beating game on day 1.
Wait, we're not giving Mike Madonna credit on this podcast, are we?
Oh, we're not? Oh, sorry. I meant Jeremy then.
Yep, there you go.
I mean, like, even if Jeremy's injured like 60%, he's got to be Maryland's best option, right?
Oh, yeah, for sure.
But no, I feel you. I do think Mario is better than the Maryland beaters, though. Jake, how do you kind of feel on that squaring up of beaters? I think Jake died.
Jake.
Oh,
What?
I think Nasta is better,
Thanks,
like either one, like individually, but I think like the combination of like Den and Madonna at least matches them even. But I think the combined is better than Mario is.
Yeah, I think I could see that, but at the same time, like, I have a lot of respect for Mario.
Yeah.
So yeah, let's move on to pool 11 now that we've dropped down like a third of our viewers. We finally get to the pool of death. But it's also 10:45 on the East Coast on a work night, so that seems pretty random. So yeah, pool of death. Texas Cavalry, Warriors Quidditch, Michigan, Tufts University, Illinois State University. So we've got 2 top 15 community teams in the Cavalry and the Warriors, and we've got 3 teams that are all long-term college programs that have a history of kind of contending with those really top teams. And we have Michigan coming fresh off the Bowling Green win. I mean, Tufts was played in range with Bosnia for most of the game at their regionals. They took QCB, admittedly weakened QCB to overtime back in the fall. There's lots of interesting things going on here. So, I mean, Jake, the Warriors and Tufts, both teams you're familiar with, kind of at the heart of what the intrigue of this pool is going to be. How do you kind of see it breaking down? Or do you think maybe we're giving too much credit to Tufts and it's kind of like a 3-team pool more than anything? Yeah, Jake's definitely just down for
You're asking me, Ethan.
Yes, I was Jake.
Wait, he talked for a second.
I know, he said, are you asking me? And I said yes.
Oh, sorry, my internet's cutting in and out. Can you hear me now?
Yes,
Yep.
we can.
Cool. All right. Yeah, no, definitely this pool is real interesting to me because it's 1 through 5 kind of all over the place in play styles and lots of history, and Tufts at that 4 is just so rough for everyone.
I mean, so Tufts is now creating the pool of death for a second straight year by like having a really crappy regular season and getting drawn a really low pot. They ended up screwing themselves over last year because they played terribly, and they went 0-4, I believe. So let's start from the bottom to see like what we can kind of take out. So Tyler, do you think Illinois State can compete in this pool?
I think if they slowballed that they could pull a game or 2, but from what it sounds like they're not doing that anymore. So I'm not super confident. I think one of the other teams would have to play a bad game for Illinois State to sneak a win.
Which, I mean, Tufts totally valid possibility to play that game. They do it like once every 4 games, if not more often than that. So if we say Illinois State's a step down, do we think Cavalry is totally safe in this pool with their style of play and the quality of the teams? We have the safe to move on.
I mean, it's safe to move on. Yeah.
Okay.
Oh yeah. Okay.
I mean, remember, like, crazier things have happened. Like, the Warriors once came in the World Cup as like a top 10 team and didn't make bracket play from a pool of death. Okay, I guess nobody's believing that about this pool. That's fair.
Well,
Wasn't
I mean,
that NYDC? Okay.
it was
no.
NYDC.
It was NIDC.
Okay.
God, I'm so old.
I mean, like they're gonna move on. I can't imagine them losing 3 times,
Yeah.
that's fair.
which is what's gonna happen. What's gonna need to happen. Whether or not they necessarily sweep the pool, I think that's a better question.
Okay.
Um,
Do we think all 3 of those other teams can potentially take a game from them, or do we think only Warriors or only Michigan Warriors or all 3 of them?
I'm gonna
I
let
see
Tyler
this-
take this one.
Go for it.
I see this being very similar to the pool they got last year, which was DCQC, Utah State, Miami, where all of those games ended up being close. I could see Warriors or Michigan taking the pool, but I still think that is Cavalry to lose. I mean, Warriors really have to rely on their quaffle game, which Texas has enough quaffle players to match them with. Michigan is kind of in the same boat. And so I think if Cavalry tries to come out and play like the way they've been playing, they are definitely like in trouble for an upset, but they have the talent to be able to win this pool.
No, I think that's totally fair. So we get to the 3 teams in the middle: Warriors, Michigan, Tufts. It feels like on any day, any of those teams could play the other ones in snitch range. Jake, you seem to be nodding.
I would agree with that. I feel like this is the pool where you're going to get the winner at like seed 11 or 12 and the second place team at like 13 or 14.
Right. Or it'll be something like 4-0, 2-2, 2-2, 2-2, 0-4.
Yeah, that's
and you
true.
get like a low seeded team that like gets through on a tiebreaker and someone who gets eliminated at 2-2 on a tiebreaker. Tyler, do you think this is the Michigan team we see every year, or do we think it is a lesser version of them and they just played a good game last weekend?
I mean, I'm not gonna lie, I was super down on this Michigan team coming into the season after the enrollment was announced. But after watching the BG game, I mean, it looked like they played really well, but like I kind of said in the 8th man group, like they were missing their primary ball carrier in Dan, and also it sounds like they were also missing Maria Mims, who is their best female chaser. So I mean, it wasn't like a full BG team, but this looks like a much better Michigan team than we saw at the beginning of the season. So it's definitely a team that can give like the Warriors trouble, which I from what I've heard from Michigan is definitely a matchup that they wanted after last year.
Yeah. So for anybody who doesn't know, like Michigan draws Amanda Dallas no matter what team she's playing for, literally every year in World Cup, and that managed to keep up. Like NYU and the Capitalists and Warriors, they've drawn them all multiple times. It's really ridiculous. But yes, so what's interesting about this pool is it doesn't have kind of like one of the people I feel like we refer to as the elite beaters in the sport. So, I mean, it's going to come down to like, I think who could advance from this pool is going to kind of come down to who's got the hot hand. Whether it is, I mean, one of the myriad beaters the Warriors throw out there, whether it's one of the young Michigan beaters, whether it's Ari Panzer for Tufts. But I think that also keeps the pool more wide open, and why it's going to make like every game in this pool kind of must watch. Because when there's not a beater to control it, like things tend to get a little bit more crazy and run wild. And like I don't think Michigan and Tufts are the teams that are going to slow the game down. Cavalry obviously will, but that just plays into them playing more close games.
Yeah. I mean, Cole Travis is probably the best beater in this pool, and he started beating like 4 months ago.
Exactly. Yeah, I think that's fair. But also, like, all these teams are going to be well gamed planned. Like, all these teams watch film and do a lot of strategizing. Like, down the line, they're all going to have game plans for Cavalry because Cavalry is a known entity in how they play the sport.
Yep.
So I think it should be really interesting. If you had to go gut, I guess we can kind of go down the line. What 3 teams, in what order do you have coming out of this pool? So, Tyler, if you want to start.
I'm going Cavalry, Michigan, Warriors.
Okay. Kyle?
I'm going to go Cavalry, Warriors, Tufts.
Jake?
I'm going to go in the order they're in, Cavalry, Warriors, Michigan.
I think it's fair. I'm kind of going to go to Jake's way because anytime I have a chance to slow roll Tufts, I'm going to. So let's move on to our last pool. We've got 7 minutes to finish this thing on time, which I never thought was going to happen. So go us. So Jake can finally go to sleep because we finally got to his pool. So QC Boston, the pot 1 team here. Kansas, the pot 2. Carolina Heat Quidditch, the pot 3. UTSA, it's University of Texas San Antonio, pot 4. And Indiana University Quidditch Club, pot 5. So Jake, same thing we've done with all of our guests. As a pot 1 team, how do you feel about your draw overall?
I'm really happy because we didn't get the cupcake pool, and we didn't pull like a Lone Star or Lake Erie Elite or anything like that as our pot 2.
Right.
I think it's a really well-rounded pool that's going to challenge us, but it's not like, oh crap, we just had to play the probably best team in the country day 1 of nationals. This isn't going to go well. Type of deal.
No, I mean, I don't like, we talked about this on the pod and it's not relevant, so you don't have to answer either way, but like Kyle and I were like debating how hard you could even go against Lone Star on Saturday if you had to play them. But that's
really
obviously
tough,
not going to, yeah, it's
you
not going
can't
to be
show
the
your
case here.
team like that.
Sorry?
You can't show your hand to a team like that.
Right. I'm sure Harry would totally disagree with you, but that's okay. Kansas, on the other hand, is more of a tempo-based team. I don't think it's a team that's going to kind of hit you hard all day and kind of tire you out.
I don't know. That was the team that caused us problems 2 years ago with Swiss style. That's the one that knocked a couple of our players either out or hurting into day 2. So they're definitely a physical team.
Yeah. So Tyler, we got in an argument a couple of weeks ago where you kind of were super high on, I guess maybe super high on Kansas isn't the right word, but you were low on other top teams.
I like Kansas a lot. I don't think that they can take QCB.
Okay,
honestly.
that was gonna be my question.
Yeah, I think they'll make a game out of it. I think if QCB, if QCB were a team that would come in and like be nonchalant about it, Kansas could absolutely upset them. But QCB is not the team that's going to do that.
Right. So I think one of the key day 1 storylines is going to be Austin Pitts against Harry Greenhouse. Can he top his tackle? That's what we all want to see.
Cameras are going to be on every single play.
Oh, for sure, for sure. I feel like Jake, if they get way ahead, just has to lead Harry into one of those hits.
Oh, absolutely.
Totally.
My ref team buddy, I'm going to make him look good at all times.
No, that's totally valid.
All right. Do you guys think that QCB could max out / get a top 4 seed out of this pool, though? Because like Jake said, it's not a cupcake pool.
Yes. I don't think there are, outside of the ones we labeled as cupcake pools, which is only 2, and we're not even sure Mizzou could max out. We're sure Gambits are going to be a top 4 team. We haven't named one other team we're super confident
Texas
about.
State.
Yeah, so
yeah,
Texas
I feel
State.
like Texas State.
But even if you say those 2, I mean, that means 2 other teams would have to perform better across 4 games than QCB would against these 4. I think that's unlikely.
I'm not confident QCB can max out Kansas unless they're going to specifically try to max out that game. I think Kansas is going to be smart enough, and they're again a very physical team. The Midwest is a very surprisingly physical region, and they have enough players offensively to score. But I don't see them winning. But I don't see them QCB maxing.
I don't see
like I said,
any bona fide pot 1 team maxing out a bona fide pot 2 team, and we're a bona fide pot 1 and Kansas bona fide pot 2. It shouldn't happen.
Yeah.
The ones that are misseeded or put in the wrong pots, it'll happen, but not in a good amount of pools.
No, I tend to agree with that as well. So Carolina Heat, really solid pot 3 team as well. Made the South Regional Finals, gave Florida's Finest a solid game there. And yeah, I think as lazy as this is to say, this pool is one of the perfect, every team is on the right pot line and has a nice gap between the next team down. And I really would expect this to just kind of go straight down the pots.
Yeah.
More so than almost any pool. I feel like we've talked about a lot of interesting middle of the pools. UTSA, Tyler, do you think them and Heat can end up swapping? I believe you placed a bet on this already in the QCB.
Oh, yeah.
Sorry,
So
I don't know why I said the QCB group. I don't know why.
Tad Walters, Josh, and Mike Madonna all seem to think that UTSA is going to walk over Carolina Heat. I'm hoping that me saying this on this pod will at least inspire them over that. But I have a lot of confidence in Carolina Heat. Steven Schwartz is a great player. Honestly, I think in that game alone, he provides too much of a matchup problem to really put that will put UTSA out of range. I think UTSA is a good team, but I didn't see anything from them at Southwest Region that made me think like they could go up a pot in their pool.
No, yeah. So I seem to feel the same way about Indiana, Tyler.
I'm super biased. I obviously know a lot of IU players, but like this team is very top heavy. They rely on really like 3 or 4 players to do literally everything. Literally, Matt Pesch will probably play every single position in every single game. And so like I think that if they kind of save themselves for like a UTSA or Carolina Heat game, they could like make games of those, but I don't see them making it out of this pool.
I think that's totally reasonable. Also, I feel like we need to shout out a great comment in our IQA forums thread by Shane Hobart, who said, if we drew Lone Star, I would have done everything in my power to make it 0-0 when Stitch came on pitch and pool play. Which I think kind of sums it up. I think that's totally a fair way to look at it. But yeah, I mean, I think that's about all we have to say about that pool. Jake, a couple QCB related questions before you go, as we've drilled all of our guests. As a theme in our guests, it seems, QCB recently dropped games. Yours were unofficial. Bowling Green and Gambit's both lost official games. But you guys lost more games than you've lost in a year and a half. So do you kind of take those? I mean, and they're unofficial, so a good thing, a bad thing, a chance to kind of develop, a chance to kind of ground yourselves. We talked about the Lost Boys lost last year and how valuable that was to all of us as a team. So kind of how did you take that Cat City experience?
The exact same way we did last year. It was a wake-up call. It definitely helped. I mean, granted, our mindset this year is a little different than it was last year. But still, I mean, when you are 19-0 and it's the middle of March, whether you times a week or once like we've been, it's still pretty cool. But at the same time, you can definitely fall into that trap of, yeah, like we don't have to try anymore. We can get stagnant, be stale. So it definitely helped motivate some people. We found some weaknesses in our own game, which we've hopefully remedied. And yeah, I was glad we lost again, especially unofficially, so we can keep the nice 0.
I don't know, Jake, if you guys have only been practicing once a game, then people have just been lying to me when I want to play board games with them. So I'm pretty.
I mean, we've gone over to Harvard like twice to throw the ball around, like me, Max, and Harry, but I wouldn't consider that a practice. I guess twice a weekend now, but
no, I totally understand. So last season, when we all went into US Quidditch Cup together with QCB, I guess we were the number 1 team at the time. You guys had won an MLQ championship. Boston had never won any kind of US Quidditch Cup championship. This year, you guys come in defending champs, undefeated officially. Again, number 1 in the country. Would you say the pressure is higher or lower this season entering the tournament?
no, we put so much pressure on ourselves last year. Like last year was championship or bust. Honestly, like you can ask anyone that's on that team, and if we didn't come away with the trophy, we were going to feel disappointed based off of what was going on. And this year's a little bit different. As enjoy it more this year. Like it's not just win or bust. Like yeah, it's fun to win, but it sucks to lose. But it's also nice to just enjoy the game again. I think MLQ is a better showcase of competitive Quidditch than the USQ season is. And to me, the USQ season is a developmental league and MLQ is the real one now. So
I didn't even pay him to say that. Like I didn't even ask him to say that.
I mean, we have. I'm 26. I shouldn't be playing against 19-year-olds at Tufts, BU, and Brandeis on a weekly basis. That's just not fair to anyone. Like it's ridiculous.
All right. Well,
we should be playing Bosnia and Rochester in a 3-game series once a month.
Anybody have any other questions for Jake?
Nope.
All righty. Well, Jake, thanks so much for joining us. And best of luck next week at Cup.
Thanks. See you there.
Alrighty, so that concludes our entire pool rundown. So just the last thing we want to do before we end the show, let's go with, I guess, who we see as the top 4 seeds going into day 2, and then who we see as our US Quidditch Cup champion. And Tyler, if you just want to, like, it makes sense for you to say Lone Star, and it's still a valid answer. So I guess beyond that, who you would think, who would be your second choice?
Okay. So I don't have Lone Star actually as a top 4 seed going into day 2.
That's
I think it ends up being, I think Gambits are the straight up number 1 team, and then Texas State 2, QCB 3, and Mizzou 4.
Okay, I think that's a valid argument. And then
Lone
champion?
Star. Lone Star. I mean,
And who do you think Lone Star plays? All brackets be damned.
oh my gosh. I'd want to play like Gambits or QCB in the finals. That's yeah.
Okay.
Let's go with Gambits. I like purple.
Okay, Kyle.
I'm gonna go with Gambits at 1, Texas State at 2. I'm gonna go with Lone Star at 3, and I will put UT at 4. Unfortunately,
Interesting.
as much as it pains me to say it.
And your
I was
champion?
really hoping it would be. I was really hoping it would be the case this year. Anyways, and I'm gonna go with Tyler and go with Lone Star as well.
All right, sticking with what you said earlier. So I'm gonna say Gambit should be number 1. I'm actually gonna say that I think Lone Star will be number 2. I think QCB will be number 3 and Texas State will be number 4. I think they actually might find some ways to stumble on a few points in that pool. Not that they're not going to go 4-0, because they're going to go 4-0. And then I'll keep sticking with what I was saying until somebody proves they can beat that QCB team with Max Avalon. Obviously, they lost twice without him. I'm not going to pick against them. So QCB it is. So that is our show. Thanks everybody for listening. We were up at around 100 people to begin with, and now it's 11 o'clock on a Tuesday night, so it's totally reasonable that we're not at 100 people anymore. Stay tuned for more Eighth Man content. We won't do any more live pods, but we might do another pod before the World Cup. But also we have our annual unpopular opinions article, Eighth Man Standby.
Oh yeah, forgot about that one.
Thanks, Kyle, for the supernatural reaction because you actually forgot it was a thing.
I did, and I'm very excited to contribute to it. That's one of my favorite articles.
No, it is. Our record is mixed year to year, but we've had some pretty cool calls. We did call that Warriors not making bracket play that we talked about earlier. Yep. So yeah, thanks for tuning in. Stick with us for future content, and we will see you all in just 11 days for US Quidditch Cup 10. Have they decided if it's X or 10 yet? I really think it should be X. It's so much cooler as X.
Yeah, I think it should be X, but they're probably going to go with 10.
I know. It's really sad. All right. Thanks for listening, everybody. Take care. Watch out for towels. See ya.